Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Red for Anfield Index. It is Sunday, the 9th of March. It's less than 24 hours after Liverpool were victorious with a 3-1 victory at Southampton, where there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to digest, and as ever, we'll talk about all the off-the-field activities that are going on. I'm your normal host, Dave Davis, coming to you from a pretty chilly Edinburgh, which was very different to Anfield yesterday. I think it's fair to say. I was there. It was, I'm guessing a little bit here, but I think it was 17, 18 degrees. There was a proper ray of sunshine. There was a few fellas making sure they had shade, put it that way. But a glorious day for football. And it was all mixed, wasn't it? Let's be completely honest. I think it's important to phrase it under that heading, mixed. But ultimately, when it's all said and done, the result is great. It's a victory by a couple of goals. There's some favourites on the score sheet. We're moving into the next game against PSG. Some only played 45 minutes. It's important. We'll talk about that as well. And ultimately, Liverpool are 6 points clear at the top of the Premier League. I mean, if you can't be happy about that, 16 points clear, no injuries. You know, there's not really too much I can say on that. So here we are. It's on the screen for those of us that are on YouTube. 70 points the Reds are on. It's still staggering, isn't it? Because when people talk about the weaknesses in this team, where it can improve, how we still haven't played anyone. And yet it is possible for the Reds to actually end up on 97 points. Not that I think they will do that, but yeah, it is crazy when you think about that. Arsenal, they kick off against United later today, don't they? 16 points adrift. That's the 4:30, just in case you're planning your afternoons around that GMT time. But let's talk the Southampton game. I mean, what a contrast of the two halves. I mean, literally night and day. And if you look at the stats that are on the screen there, doesn't really tell the full tale of the game, does it, in all honesty? I mean, RXG, 4.95 against Southampton's 0.28. Now, before the game, that is exactly the sort of XG you'd have predicted. You'd think many did, a battering, however they phrased it. And whether it was a mix of complacency, tiredness from the exertions in Paris, who really knows? Maybe a little of column A, a little of column B, but that doesn't really tell the full story, does it? Even the XT threat, 199 to 0.52. Yes, the field tilt, 83.9 to 16.1, almost tells the tale of the second half, doesn't it, realistically? And possession, we had 71%. But there's a lot more to it than that, isn't there? And probably the best place to start is to let Arne Slot say it, because a few of the players mentioned afterwards about what he said at halftime, but let's listen to what the man himself said around halftime and his actions.
But I don't think I was wrong this time if I said at halftime that energy levels were far too low. And that is what had to change. And that's why we made 3 substitutions, just to, apart from bringing in quality, also create something. Because 9 out of 10 times when you take 3 out, the other 8 are like, ooh, something else should happen. And that's the only thing I could come up with at halftime to create something different for the second half.
Yeah, definitely not happy with those energy levels. You can see it on his face. He wasn't betraying any reactions there, was he? And you got it. Listen, I was there at the game, and there was a Curtis Jones shot where it goes wide quite early doors, and then there was a lot of nothing and just struggling to create, giving the ball away, a few bones and groans from the crowd. And I've seen people say, "Oh, the crowd should, lift in," and I get that. Anfield, and before anyone debates this as well, I go regularly to Anfield. Anfield has always been, in the best possible way, part of a reactionary stadium. Things need to happen at times, don't they? And then the crowd just creates that absolute wall of sound that engulfs the opposition, like it did for Southampton in the second half. You could just almost feel they're having their life strangled out of them. But in the first half, as Arne Slot said, it wasn't there. And it was quite insightful the way he put it, that almost I made 3 substitutions to sort of jolt them into the action to, something I think to do. If you look at the subs, and we'll talk about the personnel specifically later, I think some subtle tweaks and just the nature of the substitutes played a great part, as well as obviously all being great players. But if you think back a little bit to the game, let's just listen to this clip as well from Trent, because I want to talk about this and what he says.
9 to go, 16 clear, another massive week. It just keeps rolling on, doesn't it? But you've just got to dig deep now, haven't you? Recover well.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Of course, no, can't downplay too much how important today's win was. To go 16 clear at this stage of the season is huge. Puts a lot of pressure on Arsenal. So we've done our work in the league now until after the internationals. Now we focus on the 2 other competitions.
Yeah, I think in the strangest way, the Southampton game is imminently forgettable now, isn't it? Maybe the first half plays a part in that, but it's about straight into the PSG game. This was just about winning, no injuries. I know people would have had thoughts of maybe a high score lines, but that was what it was about. A win, no injuries. A lot of players only played 45 minutes as well, which was crucial. And Damo put in there in the chat, Slot is so flexible between games and within games and not afraid to change players or tactics earlier in the game. I agree, Damo. We saw it on the very first game of the season, didn't we? It was the Ipswich where he whips off Quansah at half-time and Konate comes on, and that was pretty telling for the rest of the season as well, wasn't it? Arne Slot will not hesitate whatsoever if he's seeing things that he doesn't like, which I think is great. It is a real strength. There is a steel almost in the way he talks, in there, a ruthless side to him in the best possible sense. And I think we've seen that many times this season. And you've got to, as much as we'll talk about the subs, give him ultimately, for me, the credit. Is it his greatest strength? Be interested to see what people think in the chat panel. Is Arne Slot's in-game management, I think they call it, the substitutions that he makes, the tweaks he makes in the second half, almost like the first half is quite often in figuring out what's going on, and then the second half is in making those tweaks, making those adjustments, almost like a game of chess, I think, at times, but with a ruthless nature. Is that his greatest strength? Might well be for me. Let's talk about players, though, and you've got to start with these 2 handsome guys, haven't you? On the screen there, Darwin Nunez and Mo Salah. I mean, Darwin Nunez, could there be a bigger contrast in just 90 minutes of sort of the highs and lows there? I mean, he's having a stinker in the first half, like many others were in context. I don't know why everyone was getting het up. Have you seen some of the reactions this morning? That was just a frustration yellow card. That was all it was. It was a kick. It wasn't, they wipe him out as people are making him. It wasn't an assault. I don't know. Say the game's gone a little bit, but it's just one of those standard yellow frustration cards, isn't it? That's all it is, nothing more. I'm going to be deadly honest. I was in the COP yesterday, and many around me in 203, we was thinking, like, you've got to get him off at half time. You've got to get Jota on. Is his head gone a bit? Is he, where is he? Little did we know the effect that Johnny Heitinger can have. And if anyone clocked it or seen the clip, a little kiss, a little cuddle, a little tap of the bum from Johnny Heitinger. All factual. That's not claiming anything that didn't happen. And what a different Darwin we got. That finish, and it's not just the finish for the second goal, let's be clear. It's the way he makes that clever run as Diaz goes to byline. He gets ahead at the front post, the near post, to make that connection and opens his foot beautifully as well, doesn't he? A really sort of cultured finish. It's like that Brentford one. It's just that it just seemed to come alive between the posts almost. It's a great goal. He also gets his body in a great place. And I don't care if anyone says he is playing for the penalty. It's a penalty, isn't it? Smallbone goes through him. He plays it well, that he gets his body in the right position. We've got to be consistent because people praise Jota for winning penalties like that in the box. So it's got to work both ways. And interestingly enough, he was the official Carlsberg man of the match, wasn't he? So, yeah, just a crazy contrast between the halves for Nunez, but a great finish for him as well. And speaking of great finishers, the man who is now level with Sergio Aguero in the Premier League stats, Liverpool's third in the highest goal scorers list. You almost run out of things to say about Mo Salah and how good he is. And both penalties are outstanding. Absolutely brilliant, by the way. But just his in-game, the creation of chances, the things that he did, he almost came alive with the team at the second half. He was the catalyst for it. A lot of moves, a lot of chances created. That's kind of being ignored a little. But yeah, Mo Salah, I mean, I don't almost want to keep repeating his goal stats week in, week out, because I almost want to see where he gets to, and I don't want to jinx it at all. But the other thing I saw this morning is a mate tweeted me, the highest fantasy, if you play that, is it fantasy points season in history? And there's 9 games still to go. Absolutely insane, those two were yesterday. Let's not ignore the substitutions. We talk about how Slot should get the credit for the substitutes. So should they. I mean, there's a few to mention there. Harvey Elliott, talked about how after Paris, you thought, would he get more minutes? Earned him yesterday, didn't he? He was a big part in the change, just getting on the ball, making things happen. And even with that, for me personally, this is not being derogatory about Harvey, I thought he almost played a little bit of second fiddle to Alexis McAllister. Alexis McAllister, just almost a metronome within our side, moving things around. That midfield looks completely different without Alexis McAllister, doesn't it? That, yes, the others may have more athleticism, if you want to say he's a Bosley, Jones, Gravenberg, but as soon as you take McAllister out, the football IQ of that midfield plummets. And it would for most in the world, let's be honest. McAllister is an elite midfielder. He just makes such a big difference in moving it at the right time. Selection, football IQ, as I almost call it. So impressive yesterday. And by the way, you heard it on the cop a few times. That McAllister tune is good, isn't it? Oh, McAllister. It's good, isn't it? When you just sing it, I've been humming it a few times today. I've also been humming the Endo tune. Here's Wataru Endo. Here's Japanese Endo. That one. Brilliant, isn't it? And Endo came on, and a few lads around me went, this is it. He's going to smash into it. And first 2 tackles, bang, bang, one. That was the first thing he did. There's something unique about Endo. I don't know what it is, the way he plays. We just don't have another player like him. And almost the closing out moment, he felt important in that. So the subs bench, and credit to Robbo as well. I shouldn't ignore him in this. Simicast is having a bit of a stinker, if we're honest. He got that yellow card for a bit of a wild challenge. So every sub made a big impact. And that's not covering them all, because it was a bit strange when 6 subs came on. And even in the cup, and a few others were like, 6. So, have we counted wrong? You saw Mo Salah is on the screen, try and remonstrate, but because of that head injury, there was a concussion substitute for Bednarek, I think it was. Liverpool are allowed to make that change, aren't they? So lots of positives there, ladies and gents. Few question marks now for the coming week and that big game on Tuesday night, but we will talk about them very, very shortly. Now, if we look at AI and everything that's going on, a lot of the articles relate to yesterday's game, a few well worth a read there as well, like the post-mortem. David Lynch had a few interesting takeaways there. There was a link to Mo Chatra and the finance pod. I almost might get in trouble for this because I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin it for you. But there's some very interesting bits about analysis for this season, but also into next season. And yeah, let me just leave it at this for Eddie or Greg. I don't want to shout at me. There is a real positive trend. It is, out of everything I've seen this week, my recommended have a look, have a watch, have a listen, whatever you want to call it. So that would be my key call out for this one. This is probably the most interesting story that's caught a lot of people's eye, though. Reports that, and a target that Liverpool have looked at for some time, apparently, Joao Pedro, the Brazilian forward, maybe call him forward rather than the striker, wouldn't you? Can almost like a 10, a 9.5, I've heard him described. Some people call him the closest to Bobby Firmino that exists in the Premier League right now, which is high praise. I don't think anyone's actually saying he is directly that, but at 23 years old, there does seem a lot of potential. And people have looked a little bit at Joao Pedro last season and said, well, he hit 20 goals for Brighton when they were in Europe. Looked at him this season as well. He's on 15 goal contributions, isn't he? 8 goals, 7 assists. He has scored in his last 3 games as well. A few of those are penalties, which I understand people are fixating on, but just looks a real class player, doesn't he? And if you look at his profile this season, he plays in a mix of positions, doesn't he? He can play that forward, behind the forward, the 10 for Brighton. When he's played up top, say in 13 games this season, he's got 11 goal contributions, 5 goals and 6 assists. So it is interesting to see that. Fidel Alexander saying morning to you, Fidel, as well. Morning to anyone that's watching us through YouTube, joining us through that medium. Feel free to throw your comments in, anything you want to ask me, anything you want to talk about, share your expressions, chuck it in there, ladies and gents. So Joao Pedro, as we're talking about, a real talent. Now, he is one that me and Bart's looked at on transfer market metrics. This actually goes all the way back to sort of mid-January. So let's just have a little bit of a listen, just a small part of the segment, because you can watch the full pod, the full YouTube show, download it, etc. if you want. But just a bit I want to play you from Bart's.
I got that way, made his mark. Yeah. And in the areas where you'd be expecting him, he's 7% there, which is higher than the left and the right. So that's good to see. Brighton kind of typically play a bit of a medium block, if you like. So, but he still operates and does his fair share of the front 3 defensive action. So, yeah, I'd say there's some bits I like. I do particularly like, as I said, I think there's a lot to like about his ability to create. So if he was part of puzzles where they were changing the wingers, I don't know, if you were changing slightly the dynamic of the front 3, then you could see why you'd want a creative player in the centre. Because as we said last night, Jota's not great in build-up. He's brilliant in the box. He does your hustle and bustle, wins the ball, but he's not great in terms of their creation. So this could be an interesting alternative to that. But he's not going to be cheap, is he?
No, he's not going to be cheap. And there's a few points there, isn't there? The creative element, as you could probably see on the screen, and I'll just bring up his FB ref against Jota there. As you can see here, what does he do almost between the sticks as well and into that progressing the ball? That's his big strength, isn't it? That creativity. And you look at his progressive passes and carries, very, very similar. Essentially, as Bart said on the pod, he really moves the ball forward. No two ways about it. Take-ons are decent. Even from what we look for in our forward from a defensive nature, the interceptions, as Bart has always talked about, it's not necessarily tackles we look for our forward, it's the interception or blocking the passing lanes, as he refers to it. So that's a key element there. Even his assists, they're in the 92nd percentile against top-level, forwards that way. So his XAG overall, pretty decent. And some may look and say, okay, is it top level? These are, as Sam Maguire called this out a few months ago, his stats right now are very similar to the likes of Jota and Mane just before they joined. Almost we're trying to get them before they went supernova in that regard. And when you look at his profile laid on there, whether you call it the charts, the wagon wheel, however you want to put it, against Jota, it stacks up quite favourably in a lot of areas, doesn't it? Yes, Jota may have a bit more around the goals, but as Bart says there, Jota's a completely different type of forward, isn't he? Realistically. So, yeah, there is a lot to like. And the key line that I sort of really stood out, I think a lot of Reds are thinking at the same time, there's a creative element. It's changing the nature of the front line. If Liverpool under Edwards, Hughes, whoever want to bring a more Bobby type forward into the line, Joao Pedro does seem the one. Yeah, the one. And if you say morning, if you say hi, if you say it's your own James there, saying Joao Pedro is injury prone. He has had a few injuries, but when we've looked at them, we talked about this on TMM, injury prone would be a bit of a stretch there, to be honest, pal. It's not quite that, but yeah, that's a part of it. Speaking of injury prone, as Liverpool is Red podcast says, shout out to them. Big concern for me is Jota's always injured. Yeah, misses on average 19 games. I don't think anyone debates that at all, do they, with Diogo Jota? Availability is a huge question mark, and maybe it even brings question marks into this summer. But would you be surprised if Joao Pedro was on Liverpool's radar? Absolutely not. I don't think anyone would be surprised with that. As we said on TNM, from sort of chatting, asking as we do as normal, yeah, we are getting suggestions that he is a player that Liverpool like, amongst many others. We know Liverpool's list and their scouting portfolio is extensive. The price, as reports say in this article, I'm not too believing of the price. 42 million, I'd be astounded if we can get Joao Pedro for 42 million, unless there's some release clause that I don't know about or anything different. But put it this way, if we can get Joao Pedro for 42 million, we should be doing that deal right this second and making that move. But considering the likes of a left back in Kirkes is being talked about for 40, I don't think that price is realistic. And as Bart's talked about there, he won't come cheap. Brighton have got money. They are shrewd operators, we know, under Paul Barber and the man at the top, Tony, there. So we will see if anything develops. But definitely, probably the big news out this morning off the field on the website. So yeah, have a read and you can make your own thoughts there. Other things just to sort of clock into, AI content-wise, plenty coming up in the week. But actually, before what happens in the week, we got you covered there. I know the Raw boys did their chat. So Trev, Dave, and Carl had a good chat about the game. Well worth a listen there. I know the Gags Tandon show was out the other night, Chat G&G, the day before as well. So there's been plenty out and plenty for you to listen to there. And even in the last sort of few hours, we got you covered. Tactical analysis, different bits to focus on. So everything you want, dependent on your style, is absolutely covered there for you. Even for this coming week, there's plenty to get stuck into, isn't there? There's all the press conferences tomorrow for the game. That'll be a player on a slot. We'll have media matters with David Lynch. We'll have your news round in the morning. We'll have stat shows and different bits for you. There'll be Raw after the game on Tuesday. It just is a crazy week coming up, because if you think about it, there's no league games, so it doesn't sound like much, but there's just the small matter of a second leg in the Champions League last 16 against PSG at Anfield, followed by the small matter of a Carabao Cup final, the first trophy of the domestic season, a week today. So there will be absolute content coming out the wazoo for you there. No doubts about it. So keep your eyes peeled, have a listen. However you prefer to digest your medium, it will all be there for you. But ultimately, I suppose the focus may be a bit different for you. I don't know. It's a bit of a relaxing Sunday, because the Reds sit 16 points clear at the top of the league. That was the aim from yesterday. Whatever apprehensions, worries, anything about the first half, can let them go, because the Reds turned it on big time in the second half, as the stats and your eyes bore out. And in fact, we don't expect a favour from them at all. But could even just, if you want to watch a bit of football this afternoon, there's a few games on, isn't there? 4:30 is the one at Old Trafford. We're not expecting any favours. Chelsea, Leicester and Spurs, Bournemouth both at 2. So it's a relaxing day for any Reds. Maybe a bit of family time, a bit of gardening, whatever your vice is on a Sunday. But when you're 16 points clear, when you've got a goal lead coming into the second leg, there's plenty to look forward to. And a great shout there by Lee Wizkid as well. Liverpool's women play Arsenal in the FA Cup quarterfinals. That's 2:30 on YouTube. I think, if I'm right, Lee, and you can obviously chuck it in the chat panel if I'm wrong, that might be the first game since Matt Beard left. So fingers crossed for the ladies in the quarters, chance to get to the semis and maybe even glory there. So all the best Liverpool's women today. And there we go, ladies and gents. So much to be happy about. If you can't be happy, ecstatic right now, difficult to know what to say, isn't it, really? Just a reminder, no injuries from yesterday. 16 points clear. So much to like. And on Sunday, the 9th of March, that was another Daily Red for Anfield Index.